I'm back again demonstrating the brilliance of dwarfs in melee, hopefully dispelling the unimaginative myth that dwarfs are a missile-reliant race. As part of discussing the viability of melee strategy, I'm going to discuss faction effects and the various effects of abilities of dwarf legendary lords, so you know how that benefits viability. And this time we're taking a loving look at the Ancestral Throng and Grombrindal. So, let's have a look at him. Isn't he magnificent? First of all, we'll just look at the faction effects. So I'll just let you look at that there. You can pause it now while I go on my PowerPoint so I can give this presentation properly. And I'll talk about that. So his faction effects actually help melee combat more than ranged combat. And I'll tell you why. So plus 20% weapon strength versus all elves. So in your campaign with the Ancestral Throng, most of your enemies will be elves for a high portion of the campaign. That's dark elves, and later on high elves and wood elves if you want to go down that route. I think you might need to fulfill one of the grudges. And the plus 20% weapon strength versus all elves doesn't help missile units unless they get into melee. Quarrelers and Iron Drakes are more viable to use as hybrids when coupled with previously discussed melee attack buffs. See my other videos for that. And if you couple it with the Rune of Breaking and Grombrindal's trait and legendary skills. And then also you've got the plus 60% chance to avoid underway interception. So underway is quite useful as dwarfs because it allows you to navigate a lot easier and catch up with those pesky Skaven and basically run away more easily. When you want to run away, sometimes what can happen is you get intercepted, and if you lose that battle, all your guys die. So that's really bad. So obviously plus 6% chance to avoid interception is good. But I will say underway without Vanguard is more of a well, it's not, but it's more of an end, because you don't want, and the other reason you don't want to be in melee is in underway is because unless you're Belagar with Vanguard deployment in the underway, the underway is more of a hindrance than help to melee due to low starting proximity, a lack of any concealment terrain like trees, and a restriction on speed, flanking and multi-directional attacks. So basically, because you start really far away from the enemy, they've got more opportunity to shoot missiles at you. That's bad for you if you want to go for a melee heavy strategy. And then of course there's nowhere to hide, so they can see you coming, they can target you, and if you can't come from multiple directions and flank people, when you can't, because basically the underway is like a kind of a bowling alley, you can't flank around very easily because it's so thin, the map's so thin. So yeah, that is a good thing for melee combat, that faction effect. Also, the Ancestor Gods event helps a lot for melee because it, although only in Grombrindal's army, due to access to great replenishment or big stat buffs, and it is very much noticeable, but it is only in Grombrindal's army. The Ancestral Throng start with a runesmith. It's kind of a minor point because almost all of the dwarfs start with a runesmith. Only Thorgrim doesn't, but you do have an advantage in having a runesmith over Thorgrim because he starts with an engineer, and obviously a runesmith is better than an engineer for melee. Not every dwarf faction has access to a starting grudge which rewards the master rune of spite. If you're going to be melee grinding, obviously you want any and all area of effect abilities you can get, and if you're going to go melee heavy, to get it from melee is ideal. So Master Rune Spite is brilliant on your characters, and any dwarf faction that has that reward to start with for fulfilling a grudge, basically gets one extra, because it's a Master Rune. You're only allowed one in the current version of the game, and that means you can only have it on one army in your entire faction unless you exchange it and send it to another lord. But you can have one extra, and you can buy the other one from the forge, which is the basic, the one you normally allow. So you have the one from the reward and one from the forge. And the same applies to the Master Rune Astronomy Redbeard, which is definitely a rune integral to our melee focused strategy. So you can get 2 of those instead of 1. So that's 2 really useful runes from fulfilling the grudge. By the way, both the grudges that are involved in that one are easy to fulfill, because it basically involves fighting Malekith and Dark Elves, which you're definitely going to do. And then so you also have in Grombrindal the immediate potential to access his blue line, which gives you a +3 recruit rank. So I think that gives you like +3 melee attack or melee defense right off the bat. And then with recruitment missions and tech, you can get rank 7 units like out of the gate, so you can immediately benefit from rank 7 red line buffs. So some of those, well, all of those red line buffs for rank 7 units are really strong. I'm pretty sure that's true for any faction in the game, doesn't matter what race, but it definitely helps dwarfs a lot. Grombrindal himself, he also has a lord effect, which gives +10 leadership, which means that your units in Grombrindal's army can lose more health than usual before routing, and units in his army will only typically rout when they're completely decimated, and that's most helpful for melee combat, because typically that you lose the most health in melee, and you also get in his lord effect +10 melee defense for quarrelers and iron drakes. So I previously mentioned in the +20% weapon strength versus all elves part that quarrelers and iron drakes are more viable to use as hybrids. So this plays into that by increasing their defensibility. Like they're stronger in holding the line basically. So you get a bunch of shots off, and then by the time they reach you in melee, you've taken most of their health off, hopefully, and then you can sort of grind them down, and hopefully use your runesmith as well in conjunction to kill them in melee as well. What else? Right, so 5 out of 6 of Grombrindal's legendary skills actually benefit melee. They don't. Well, some of them do also help missile attacks, but mostly it's for melee. So that's further proving my point about dwarfs are actually a melee faction. One of his skills gives you +10 armor piercing and melee attack on defense. Is it melee attack or melee defense? One sec. So let's have a look at him quickly. Boom. Oh, it's melee defense. So melee defense when defending. So when he's defending, which honestly, when you're doing a melee heavy strategy, you don't really want to be a defender. You want to be the attacker. But when you're doing the melee defense, melee strategy, and you do get attacked, obviously you're going to be way stronger in defense, and none of that helps you in missile attacks. That's very clear. There's nothing for helping missile attacks there. Then the next skill gives you minus 50% vigor loss reduction. So that's really helpful, because basically it means you recover your fatigue 50% faster, and use that in conjunction with obstinacy to get minus 15%. Sorry, minus 65% in total vigor loss reduction, which means your guys are, you know, 2/3 of the way there to be in perfect vigor, basically, and never get tired. If they do get tired, they can recover it dead quick, so that's great. Next skill, this only really helps Iron Drakes, because I'm not going to talk about the viability of gyrocopters and artillery as melee units, because I'm just not going to advocate for that. Really, it's not good. Obviously, it makes all of these units great in great for missile attacks. I'm not going to say that it doesn't, and that's great. But what I will say about the Iron Drakes, just a moment, is that they can get pretty insane in Grombrindal's army. So I'll briefly pause that thought, because I'll first talk about this. Grombrindal has no fear. So do you see any missile help there? No missile help there. So plus 24 melee defense, 24 seconds, 55 meters effect range, and then this goes up to minus 50% cooldown. Its base cooldown is 120 seconds, so every single minute you can have this be able to be used again, and then you get another plus 4 uses. So that can be pretty insane if you have the micro to actually use it. I've got to be honest and say that the cooldown of 120 seconds means that the initial cooldown means that to start with you won't use it very often per battle, but once you get the Grimnir's resolve, like, it gets pretty insane. Your line holding ability is insane. Like, you're not going to lose models in melee very easily. Right, so with that in mind, I'll go back to talking about Iron Drakes. Okay, where's my presentation? There it is. Right, where was I? So here's an idea for you. Iron Drakes can potentially have 59 melee defense at rank 1. And then you add in the insane melee attack buffs, which I will talk about or have talked about in another video. And then base speed can increase from 26, which is slow as fuck, to 66 if you have the Stroller's Rune on one, and it's a bit less without. The weapon strength can go from 20 up to 35 thanks to Grombrindal. There's only in his army, and then obviously at rank 7, not obviously, but at rank 7, got to stop saying obviously, they go up to get the, where is it, 15% missile resistance. So while you're fighting in melee, if you have to fight in melee with Iron Drakes, they can tank some extra shots without taking as much damage. And then if you wanted to, you could stack on the Master Rune of Grungni. Let me have a look at that. Where are the banner runes? Grungni, where is it? This one. not that one. Where is it? This one. This one is a master rune, so you can only have one unit, but in your whole faction. But 10% ward save and another 20% missile resistance, and that's got a 35-meter radius. So that's 35% missile resistance plus 10% ward save on that unit. That's going to take a lot of missile abuse, basically. Just have a quick look at their health. Health's quite low, to be fair. That's another reason why they're not really that good in melee, and of course the 28 models. But basically, on paper, if you ignore the models and the low health, they can basically become like aspiring champions. And I say aspiring champions because aspiring champions got a low model count as well, but they don't have any splash damage to Iron Drakes. But when you consider how Iron Drakes work, they've got flamethrowers, so it's like aspiring champions with flamethrowers. So you do most of your damage when on the approach, and then once you get into melee, you can buff the shit out of them, and then they'll probably finish the job in melee, especially because they've got 125 armor and huge leadership. And by the way, the enemy that's approaching is also getting debuffed by -8 leadership. So yeah, it's pretty wild. It's one thing I would say is they've only got 6 charge bonus, but there is a rune for that if you wanted to go that route. It's called the Rune of Courage. And normally this rune is pretty crap, in my opinion, but it gives them immunity to psychology, so basically they won't get terrified by monsters. And it does the same thing for a character or non-character unit, basically there. And then the more important thing is the Rune of Courage gives +15 charge bonus. So if you wanted to make your aspiring champions Iron Drakes have actual charge bonus, you know, you've got another 15 there if you wanted to do that. Right, going back to the rest of it. Have I missed anything? Oh right, yeah. So let's go back into Grombrindal. Stop talking about Iron Drakes, although they are brilliant. The last thing is this. So plus 35% speed. So if I've not already talked about it in another video, I will talk about it in another video, or maybe you've seen that video. Speed is a massive part of being effective in melee combat, because you get into the you approach your enemy quickly, you reduce your proximity quickly, which reduces the effectiveness of missile units in your enemy, and it allows you to flank and do stuff like that. You can stack this with the Rune of Speed, and you can get the highest speed Dwarfs can get with Grombrindal. That's undisputable, because he's got 35%. Rune of Speed gives you another 45%. Add on Master Rune of Speed, you've got another 45%. Add on, where is it? Marching Songs, 10% for infantry units. 135% speed. Okay, 135% speed. Let's see. What did I mention something earlier? I think I did. Yeah, definitely mentioned something earlier. It's called Stroller's Rune. So 155% speed. Oh yeah, and that one gives you Vanguard deployment as well, so you can be super close to your enemy. That's for one unit though, but you do get 3 of them, but you can't use more than one of them in the army in the current build, unfortunately. I wish they changed that. So 155% speed. I'm sure if you had Grombrindal in Carrick Cadrin, that faction, you could have 165% speed. Anyway, 155% speed. Let's do a quick calculation. So let's take Iron Drakes. They have a base speed of 26. So to get 155% more speed, I need to times 26 by 2.55, which gives me 66 speed. That's pretty mad, isn't it? For a dwarf. It's higher on Slayers. It's higher on Slayers. Like, Slayers are ridiculously fast. In Grombrindal's army, you should have some Slayers in Grombrindal's army. They're basically like cavalry. Like, people are missing out on this so much. Like, every single YouTuber, like Legend of Total War, he's missing out on this shit. He's not using this strategy. And they've all dismissed these kind of ideas and not really looked into it properly. That's why I'm doing this shit. Right. So, talked about Grombrindal, and then what he can do for his army can do. The other thing as well is I forgot to mention for Grombrindal was hold on, this bit. This time of the ancestors thing, so it reduces the time between that event, and that event gives you potentially your army great replenishment and great buffs. So that reduction in the interval means that or increase in the frequency of that event popping up means that you can adjust to the situation which Grombrindal's army needs. Does he need to have buffs or does he need to have replenishment? So that's really handy, but you can't access that in any other dwarf faction. So that is one of the main advantages of the Ancestral Throng, and that's also why Grombrindal's army is weaker when it's confederated, because you don't get access to that ability. But that being said, due to his legendary blue line skills, it's always worth trying to get him onto your team, basically, because his blue line is sick. Like I said before about the recruit rank, so that's basically out the gate giving you stat buffs straight away, and then you've got minus 15% recruitment cost. That in conjunction with Thorgrim's Karazakarak, his command, greater commands faction, his provincial commands makes units super cheap. So that's brilliant. Well, I don't need to talk about that. You know how good that is. More replenishment. Now this is a bit misleading, the way that the scope's described, because loads of scopes are written in a bullshit way. But basically, this doesn't apply just to the characters, it applies to the whole army, in every single army. So that's really good. I have investigated this and I have confirmed this. It's not just the Lord, it's all the army. Well, that's good. And then obviously Lightning Strike, but yeah, everybody gets that. And yeah, that's money. So you always want to have Grombrindal on your dwarf faction, but it's really hard to get him a lot of the time because he just dies. Unless you're actually playing as Ancestral Throng. So that is an advantage of playing Ancestral Throng, because it means you'll always have Grombrindal. Whereas if you're playing Carrot Gadrin, you won't, unless you're running the Recruit Defeated Legendary Lords mod. Or you go out and try your damnedest to sail across the map to get him. What I will say as well is that Ancestral Throng, their faction effects are very situational, and while they're good in those situations, like 20% weapon strength for all units, faction wide, all characters, but only against elves. So if you're fighting against what's her name, Valkyria, which you will do, or maybe Sigvald later on in the campaign, or maybe you end up fighting the Tomb Kings, which in my opinion you shouldn't. You should actually make friends with them and trade with them so that they don't backdoor you. That's not going to apply, that ability. It's not going to apply at all, so you're not going to get any benefit from that. And then of course the 6% evasion chance, not only was it not 100% chance to avoid the underway interception, you're not always use that, because you're not always travelling around in the underway. The only way that you would get that benefit more often is to always move in the underway, which isn't always beneficial, because sometimes you can actually move faster by marching or moving regularly. Generally not regularly though. But what I would say is, in terms of Dwarf faction effects, they're kind of similar. The faction effects of Ancestral Throng are fairly similar in strength to the other faction effects of the other factions. Dwarf faction effects aren't very good overall when you compare to some of the other races and factions game wide. But that's it for discussing the melee viability when it comes to Ancestral Throng and Grombrindal.